In India, it's hardcore football season right now because of the World Cup. There's a lot of focus, talk, discussion happening, which is good for the sport, I would say. But as far as Indian football is concerned, it's a slightly depressing happening that has occurred with Indian football not being cleared to play, Indian football teams not being cleared to play in the Asian Games. And IOA has denied permission by saying that the teams are not ranked high enough, while the All India Football Federation, who runs the sport in the country, they are blaming the IOA, saying that IOA's move is undermining the progress of the sport in the country. It's a very depressing situation, considering on the global front we are celebrating football. Asian teams have been doing great at the World Cup, so I guess when we are talking about Asian Games football, it's pertinent that we get a perspective from the World Cup venue there, where our correspondent Siddhant Ane is covering the World Cup for us. And hi Siddhant, welcome to this discussion where we are talking about Indian football during World Cup season, because as things are going over here, football has gotten a rough deal from the Indian Olympic Association.
Yeah, thanks to Weber for that quite informative piece on the situation, the ongoing tussle between the All India Football Federation and the IOA regarding clearance to the team. I read that piece, and I would recommend, for background, everyone should read it. So, where unsurprisingly, the men and women football team are not going to the Asian Games. I'm not sure what the sort of media reaction, how has the media reaction been back home?
It's been a little, I mean, so obviously IOA bashing has been happening because AIFF has used their entire, like Weber said in his piece as well, they used their entire PR mechanism to actually attack IOA, saying that you guys are treating football unfairly, especially when football ranking has gone up, and we guys are looking ahead to the future.
I think it has also been magnified now, because now that the full list of sports that India are going to participate in has been released, and there are a few which are not mainstream sports. So now the debate has also gone on to, hey, football has not been included, but these have been. And while there is no merit to the argument of one sport is better than other, that's what the argument is suddenly now about how non-mainstream sports are being included, but the football team, a global sport, is not being included. And that seems to be the major argument right now, at least in the media.
But what no one has spoken about is actually the yardstick which IOA has set up and why it is important. When you send out a team, why you should expect them to win a medal, or you should have a realistic chance to actually do well there rather than make the numbers. It's about that. So, this debate always happens when India goes to a multi-sport event. So, that's raging now.
And of course, then so that is definitely, now the AIFF's counter to that debate has become, we will pay for the team if you just let us go. And that just, it's a really, that just sets a bad precedent, I would assume, for the future.
No, I don't see why. I mean, like, if the federation of a particular, that's governing a particular sport is rich, like the AIFF seems to be today, given its backing from India's largest sort of corporation, I don't see why that shouldn't have been the conversation from the beginning, that this is not a...
And if they have filled their coffers, then they would have done better to have solved this situation in a slightly more, equanimous manner. This has happened in 2014. This same thing. The guys were waiting at the airport literally till the...
It's interesting. I think, did India end up finally going? I think they finally ended up
both
going,
the teams
right?
went. They got out in the first round. Both of them were knocked out before the opening ceremony, but they went.
Exactly the same discussion is happening in Singapore, by the way. exactly the same situation. So they also last minute went to I think, the 2014 Asian Games. But again, they are not finding justification because their Olympic Association has not seen the merit in sending the teams. So what their criteria is also, interestingly enough, pretty much the same. In order for the teams to be eligible over there, they also are required to be in the top 6 in the continent, which they clearly are not, just as we clearly are not. So, I mean, the argument from the player's perspective, I guess, is one of getting experience. And while
exposure and getting matches.
has,
I mean, these guys don't get any matches.
I don't really think the Asian Games football competition is anything to be really excited about, or that the level of competition. I mean, when the games happen, I think the leagues in most parts of the world will have started already.
Well, in
I
fairness,
don't, for example, Korea will manage to secure the release of.
they will actually, weirdly enough, because Son Heung-min and Tottenham Hotspur hope that Korea wins gold. If they do win gold, then Son Heung-min is released from compulsory military service. And that means that 2 years of...
That's what the story is.
Absolutely.
That's why he said that
Yeah.
he wants to play the Asian Games.
Absolutely. Because there's very little chance of him getting released for the Asian Cup. That's going to be a key point of the season. It's all right to lose him for the beginning of the season rather than lose him in January. And
Yeah.
there's a stronger chance of them winning the Asian Games rather than winning the Asian Cup. I think that's the argument.
So what is the story? That anyone who does compulsory military service...
It's not so easy. It's the story is that sometimes for exemplary performance in sports, you can be exempt from military service. It's usually upon winning a medal. The last time that a Korean football team was exempted from military service was the 2002 team, which reached the semi-finals. It was a big deal. So they were exempted. Park Chu-young, the Arsenal player, ex-Arsenal player, he was exempted because, he'd found a loophole in the system. And he was kind of hated for it. So Son Heung-min is obviously hoping that he can secure his release by getting a medal. But
and otherwise, they have how many years of compulsory service?
I think it's 2 years of compulsory service.
It's funny, there are many getting back to India, there are many sports in India whose athletes wouldn't mind a military service, and if it was compulsory, they would have been happier. Such is this thing, because it gives them some kind of security career-wise. So that
But let me just get back to the point where you were making about the standard of competition perhaps not being high enough and not something to get excited about. The thing is that for the women team and even the under-23 team, the excitement is not about the level of competition. The excitement is just about getting to play football at that level. I mean, the women team hasn't played a competitive international since July of last year. The under-23 team has played 3 matches the whole of last year.
So, but that takes us back to the point where IOA versus AIFF, the battle that is raging here. And like when we started the discussion, we said that AIFF has come out all guns blazing, saying that IOA is unjust and all that. But what has AIFF done for these teams? So, women's team, if they have not played a competitive match since last year, and that too, last July's fixture was not a competitive match, it was a friendly against Malaysia. So, what are they doing? And every 4 years, they just come, they just wake up 1 month prior to the Asian Games and they just cry saying that we should need exposure for these players, you guys should give us clearance, otherwise their future is in jeopardy and all that. While their future has always been in jeopardy because the AIFF sleeps through the 4 years. They are focused more on the priced leagues that they are pushing for, saying that this is what the future is, this is what is going to bring the golden generation, which one day 70 years down the road probably would take us to the World Cup. So it's, a yardstick has been set. You stick to that yardstick, try to match that yardstick. If it doesn't happen, make sure that the players are getting exposure through the years, and then step up their game slowly, surely, and then stake a claim that you give us a wild card kind of a thing because we have done so much for the team, and this exposure would be an additional step towards what we are trying to achieve.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can understand all the arguments. I can understand, but this entire situation, in my mind, very accurately reflects the standard or the standing of Indian football at the moment, for sure. I mean, if other countries are not, if the argument is that this is a ready-made tournament where competitors are coming ready-made and we don't have to do any of the arrangements, right? That's a pretty weak argument because there should be no logical reason why other teams do not want to play against India, except that the Indian team is not worth playing against. From any other perspective, like if you look at cricket, for example, the entire cricketing world, or hockey for that matter even, is dying to play against India because all the money is comes from our sort of the Indian economy that drives the sport. And football needs to sort of leverage that same economic model and head in the same direction if we are to become anything of any standing in global football. So this argument that it's difficult to organize friendlies because of our national ranking and all of that, it's a really weak argument for sending a team to the Asian for sure. But by the way, also the other question I have is the IOA in its sort of preliminary list sent a list of 2,300 something athletes and officials to the sports ministry for clearance. Now, I'm pretty sure that in that preliminary list, both the men and the women's football teams were included, right? Finally, the money has to be disbursed by the sports ministry, or what is now Sports India. I don't know.
No, that is
No,
sports.
that's different.
That's a different story. We'll get to that.
Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sport.
MIAS.
Yeah. Under which Sports Authority or Sports India falls. So the final okay to spend money comes from them, right? So on the one hand, the sports ministry is spending money on sending Indian junior teams. For example, the under 16 team is currently out on an exposure tour for a month ahead of the AFC under 16 championships. So on the one hand, they are spending money on exposure tours and development for Indian football. But in this case, they deemed it not the right decision. I don't know. So there's inconsistency in the decision making, it seems. Unless they've decided that by the time players are at an under 23 level, they're already too old to get any better. So therefore, they don't deserve any development. I don't know. I don't know what the logic is. But it seems a bit bizarre, and it seems like that it's been a long time since there's been any politics involving the AIFF and the IOA. So maybe they were just itching for a bit of a fight.
No, the fight is always good if it brings out a result which favors sport in general. But here the fight seems to be an ego clash, which Vaibhav, during the course of contacting people for his stories, realized when the top brass of IOA and AIFF, they had some interesting mudslinging to do.
I mean, when I spoke to the General Secretary of IOA, Rajiv Mehta, it just, I just came out with the feeling, I mean, we spoke on the phone a couple of times, and all I was trying to do was get clarity on whether the IOA would approve the team going if the AIFF was willing to give the money, A. And secondly, if the AIFF's arguments that they have put out to the media in their press releases has reached the IOA at all. And from what I understood, I mean, this could have also been just, of course, just a disinterested interviewee. But Rajiv Mehta seemed to have absolutely no idea about any of these things. His simple answer to all these questions was almost like in a monotonous, like, unka ranking kya hai? अगर टॉप 8 में हैं तो जा सकते हैं, वरना नहीं जा सकते. हमारे गाइडलाइन तो साफ है. So that's
from his point of view, that's absolutely accurate. It's spot on. If you look at Great Britain in terms of how they run their Olympic funding program for sports, I mean it's extremely harsh.
yeah, absolutely.
Even US, that for that
absolutely.
matter.
The US though is another story altogether, where existing Olympic medalists have to raise money and can't afford to train for the next games. I mean, but the level of sort of talent and availability of talent that they have in the United States is a completely different story. So let's not get into that. But because we compete at somewhat of a similar level as Great Britain, at least as far as the Commonwealth Games are concerned, maybe we can draw some examples of public funding from there. And even sports that have won medals at the Olympics, if they did not meet the criteria for the number of medals they won, the slash in funding was drastic.
I think for British cycling, this had happened not too long back. It just happened, I think, a few years back.
Till they revived it and then they brought out this generation of cyclists.
It's about time that across sport, and I mean, I don't mean this to be critical of football in particular. I think many disciplines need to shape up, and our athletes need to stop getting used to getting stuff for free. You know, living on this kind of government dole system that's not related to performance in any way at any international level. Just being the best in India within a small pond, I mean, a really small pool of talent shouldn't automatically merit anything at all, I think.
It's simple. The word would be professional about it. Approach the entire episode professionally, and athletes at their level, at their personal level, they should be molded into that kind of a system. But then, what is happening in India is that organizations, federations like the Football Federation, the Olympic Association, or the other federations across disciplines, they all have set up a framework which actually makes the athlete slave of that system, where they have to wait for a rollout, because it's ultimately it won't be about how much fund he has created. Ultimately, it would be whether the authorities again clear him. There is a political play over there. People's careers have been jeopardized in the future. Like for instance, the Commonwealth gold medalist Neeraj, the javelin thrower, Neeraj Chopra, and he had to, I mean, he wanted to go out and train, and Sports Authority of India, now Sports India, they said that what would a young athlete like him know about what is good for his future? We will decide where he trains. And we have been training and molding athletes for long now, but you name how many athletes, as in I am talking about athletics in specifically, how many athletes have done well at the world level? Handful of them. For Olympics, though, out of the question. So yeah, we were discussing.
I mean, also, like, while I understand this argument completely, that the athletes have to step up, but I mean, when I was speaking to a couple of the women players, you can understand their situation, and you just get disheartened by what the AIFF has not done for them.
I mean, yeah, I agree completely with that.
I mean,
women's football is an absolute farce.
I mean, for them, it's not just about. It's almost like they're going to get to play. That's what they are really missing out on. And again, I don't want to.
For any athlete, I mean, anyone like who has even being part of a squad that goes to the nationals in any sport is an exciting opportunity. I mean, it's an extremely fun experience for any athlete to go through, and to go to a multidisciplinary event like the Asian Games is extremely. I mean, being in the Games Village with all the other athletes from all over the world, the experience is tremendous, undoubtedly. And for women's football, yeah, given that in the normal calendar, they have barely any opportunity to play any football at all. It definitely a case should be made.
I mean, I don't want to. It's inappropriate to compare different federations, but I must say, like here, them and I, yeah, them a little bit of credit must be given to, like, say, Hockey India, who for years, you know, the women team was not competitive at the Asian level.
Yeah, and they brought them up.
Yeah, I mean, since the Delhi Commonwealth Games, they've really given them exposure, made sure they're sending them out constantly. Now the Indian team is ranked 3rd in Asia.
Again, no, also, it's a good point that you bring up. Also, one thing that is of note, when Hockey India does its annual awards, the prize money that is given to the best players, male and female, is the same. So they've got that parity in terms of payments also, which is a really progressive and positive step in Indian sport, but local sport.
And also in the manner that they've brought parity at all levels. The two teams train at the same center. They're treated with the same respect. They're given the same facilities. In fact, the disciplinary recommendations and regulations are similar. I mean, there is no crossing of boundary, no lax treatment for the women team, nothing of that sort.
So, besides, taking forward from that, besides treating both the teams equally, AIFF can learn one more thing which you were mentioning earlier, that present India as a lucrative place where teams can come in and use the market potential here. So, national team, be it the national teams, because national teams themselves are big brands these days. I am talking about the big teams who are playing in the World Cup in Russia, for instance, now. And also club teams. I mean, club teams are looking to get entry into this thing. And imagine club teams coming here and playing friendlies with the national team. That can be arranged, right? Qatar does that.
Yeah, anything can be arranged.
No, I think also...
I remember being at a women's match in Kolhapur, where a junior team had come from the Netherlands, from their center of excellence, to play against the Indian women's national team. They played 2 matches in front of 25,000 people in the stadium. The European girls were so delighted by the situation, like they were saying that there is no way we can, in any country in Europe, go to a stadium and find 25,000 people to come and watch us play. It's impossible. It's never going to happen. Maybe if in the Women's Champions League final, there'll be that kind of a crowd. But otherwise, it's unlikely. So there's no argument to say that women's soccer, women's football will not be watched, that it cannot draw a crowd, it cannot draw sponsors. These are all basically lazy arguments being made by people who don't want to work towards developing that side of the sport. And why they're doing it?
Like also, they've missed a trick here. Like now we're just going to compare this situation with AIFF to the IPL and cricket and the HIL and hockey, where they took the 2 leagues, okay? IPL made Indian cricket rich and lucrative for foreign teams to come in. I mean, it gave the BCCI, earned them a lot of money. The HIL did the same for hockey, okay? It gave players incentive to come here, play, gave them a lot of money. And then also they turned it around and made India the center of the hockey universe almost. They took that money that was being put into HIL, took the sponsors for HIL and turned them into sponsors for hockey at the...
FIH actually, they are the main sponsors for FIH.
And then made India the hub. Like, I mean, India hosts a world event in hockey every year. For the last 5 years, I can remember them hosting something or the other every year. We're having the World Cup this year. We had the Champions Trophy a few years back. We had the Hockey World League a couple of years back. And the World Cup, the Junior World Cup a couple of years back. So it's just, I think the AIFF, like, here's where the ISL has maybe missed a trick. Where just concentrating on just, I don't know, getting Del Piero to come and play for Delhi.
No, but it's a little tricky because you can't compare HIL with ISL because the levels are again different. HIL was top class. It's a world class event. Absolutely. The best in the world, best current players in the world. Absolutely. It was like Lukaku's and Mbappe's coming and playing in the ISL. So you can't compare both that way in that regard.
Fair point.
Of course, you can't compare the two, but whatever little bit of interest there is in Indian football here at a sort of global event is only because India is considered the last sort of untapped frontier for football to grow. And because of the rate at which the Indian economy has been growing for the last 15, 20, 25 years, I mean, the potential for Indians to spend the kind of money that they spend on cricket today, whether it's broadcasters spending on TV rights or advertisers spending on advertising while those matches are on television, or people spending buying shirts and paying ticket prices and drinking Coca-Cola at the stadium, all of these things is what is attracting global football towards India. Otherwise, I mean, nobody is really, there are enough Messis and Ronaldos in the world. We don't need one from Kerala to change global football. It's not an essential requirement. But having 60,000 Mallus at the stadium, that can be a potential game changer. So why Indian football is being run the way it is, I have really no answers to that question.
I think we are at a consensus that let's not.
They're right. That
let's not punch the
football.
IOA here.
Let's not howl about this. Let's move on and let everyone get our acts together and figure out a proper plan. I mean, the Indian football team should be concentrating. If there's any potential in this under-23 squad, then they should be in the running for Olympic qualification. Are they? No. So what is the conversation about then? As far as other sports like Quraish wrestling and sepak takraw and roller blading and all are concerned, I mean, these are not Olympic disciplines. So I guess as far as those practicing these disciplines are concerned, the Asian Games is the highest level of competition that they can achieve. And given that scenario, if there's potential for some of these athletes to win medals at the Asian level, then that's the equivalent of the best they can do in the world. So that's fair enough. I believe they have a legitimate claim to that money to go. I mean, like Vaibhav said, there's no real argument to say that one sport, just because a sport is more popular or less popular, doesn't mean... I mean, has the BCCI... I mean, the cricket team should qualify for the Asian Games. Is cricket still an Asian Games sport, by the way? They sent some second, third, fourth...
No, this year they're not. They haven't sent a team last time around. They're not sending a team this time.
I think Bangladesh won the gold, right?
Yeah.
They're not sending teams this time, the BCCI.
For them it doesn't matter. Because...
to them it doesn't, yeah. It makes
no
difference.
But I think the argument that AIFF is making, and which is like, it again points to how lazy they are perhaps, is that a huge number of this under-23 squad would be part of the roster for the AFC Asian Cup. And so this would be valuable match practice against top opposition for them. But again, the point is just organize this separately, like stop using this.
And besides, you have to have valuable match experience against top opposition, you have to get out of the group and reach a stage where top oppositions face you, right? And is there a potential for them to?
No, they would have probably been drawn into a pot where, or drawn into a group, sorry, because they're in pot 4. So they would have been drawn into a group where they would have played either Bahrain or Korea or Saudi Arabia, one of them. And they are Saudi Arabia is in our group in at the Asian Cup.
So this entire scenario should be used probably as a wake up or as a shock treatment in a way, because 2014 spoiled them. It's very clear that we got what AIFF was arguing was that we got clearance in 2014. Why not now? And then they wasted the entire 4 years doing nothing practically, except organizing that celebrated league. So this should be a wake up saying that, yeah, let's use that money. We have money to send the team to the Asian Games, give us clearance. No, we will use that money in the next 1 year to to organize tours for them, organize matches at home, away, send them for training, whatever the thinking heads of AIFF feel is right for development of this team. Use the money for that. Don't wait for IOA. Don't wait for the sports ministry. Don't wait for Asian Games either. Like you said, Asian Games shouldn't be an asterisk for a nation who is aspiring to reach the World Cup in 20-30 years. That shouldn't be an asterisk, right? So the discussion should ideally be around what next to do rather than what to do to somehow make it to the Asian Games.
Yeah. No, it's a completely bizarre situation. I mean, you have highly paid professional athletes today in football, guys who are earning 50 lakhs, 60 lakhs, 1 crore per season playing for Indian clubs. And despite these highly paid professionals existing in a league system within the country, we are having a discussion because the sports ministry considers the national team not good enough to play at the Asian Games. So, I mean, that pretty much says everything that needs to be said about the state of Indian football today. As far as the AIFF is concerned, I don't agree that they are lazy necessarily. Maybe some of them are for sure, but there's a lot for the All India Football Federation to kind of do because of the lack of a proper club structure in this country and the new league coming in and further undermining the existing club structure to whatever extent it does exist. All the onus for developing football is on the federation. And it is impossible for a mass-based sport like football to, grow from a top-down approach like that. It has to happen from the ground up. It's the only way for Indian football to get anywhere. So the AIFF has its hands full because it sold the rights to everything. It also has very little decision-making powers by itself. On the face of it, there's no reason why it should be requiring Sports Authority money. But when it comes to the national teams, it needs money to pay players, spend on whatever, which it doesn't necessarily have because they sold the rights for so little money. 15 or 50 crore annually is not a lot of money to run all of Indian football. This includes all kinds of development activities. I mean, everything, all expenses on the national teams at all levels, from under 15 up, men and women. So many things need to be sorted for sure. And hopefully, with this conversation, it won't just be about the football team should go to the Asian Games. It should, hopefully some of these points of discussion come up in the Indian media as well, so that people understand what the hell is actually going on. And this complete sort of mismanagement at the top that's happening, that gets altered at some level.
We collectively at Newsclick, as one appeal to say to AIFF and the sports authorities that give us playgrounds and forget the rest, because sport in itself and sports persons in itself will figure out ways to develop and stake their claim to be at events such as Asian Games or Olympics, qualifying for the Olympics and the World Cup. So that kind of systematic structure should be there right from the grassroots level. Give the sports the necessary framework so that things automatically happen. Top 6 in Asia automatically is there, it's a given, and not a pushing shoving game that should be happening. And obviously things would be better, at least at the continental level. India, given the resources and the manpower that we have, the population that we have, we should be number 1 there, and there is no way why we shouldn't be reaching there. But the problem lies in what is happening right now. This is just a small bit of the larger trouble that has been afflicting Indian sport.